Right now, across the internet, a rumor is spreading like wildfire, claiming that federal investigators ripped apart the personal vehicle of an 84-year-old woman this morning and found a horrific secret hidden inside. It is a compelling story designed to go viral and generate clicks. But when you look past the noise and examine the actual court documents from Pima County and the official statements from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, a completely different reality emerges. The truth is far more chilling than any fabricated internet theory. Law enforcement records confirm that Nancy Guthrie did not have her car searched by federal agents this morning. In fact, her vehicle never left her property. When police arrived at her home, they found her car perfectly parked inside her own garage. Her mobile phone and her purse were sitting untouched exactly where she would normally leave them. The only vehicle that was actually towed away by authorities recently was located 2 miles away from the crime scene. That vehicle did not belong to the victim. It belonged to an unidentified individual hiding in the shadows. The internet wants you to focus on a car that was never missing. But forensic investigators are focusing on something much darker. To understand exactly what happened on the driveway of that elderly woman, we have to ignore the digital whispers and look directly at the physical evidence left behind on the concrete. We have to look at the blood. In a case where dozens of baseless rumors are born every single day, we must rely entirely on verified forensics and physical proof. If you value the truth and want to follow along with deep dive forensic investigations, make sure to subscribe to Tracking Evil with John. We will tear down the misinformation and build a timeline based solely on facts. Because the real story of what happened to the mother of a prominent television host does not need embellishment. It only needs to be brought into the light. Let us examine the anatomy of a viral lie. A headline drops claiming a breakthrough discovery inside the personal vehicle of the victim. People share it without reading the underlying police reports. They assume the authorities have cracked the case wide open. But the true crime community must be smarter than that. We must be forensic in our consumption of information. When we strip away the falsehoods, we are left with a terrifying void. A void where an elderly woman vanished without taking a single essential item with her. An 84-year-old body operates on a strict and unforgiving schedule. For Nancy Guthrie, every single day required a precise routine just to maintain her baseline health. Medical records and official statements confirm she relies on a pacemaker to keep her heart beating at a steady rhythm. She requires daily heart medication to survive. This is not a woman who could spontaneously decide to go on an impromptu vacation. She is a highly vulnerable individual whose life is tethered to her prescriptions and her medical devices. Beyond her physical requirements, her daily life was anchored by an unwavering spiritual routine. Every single morning without fail, she would log onto her computer to attend her online church services. This digital footprint was as consistent as the sunrise. When you study missing persons cases involving the elderly, you look for the anomaly. You look for the moment the established pattern breaks. For someone with a pacemaker and a rigid morning schedule, a broken routine is not a sign of absent-mindedness. It is a blaring forensic alarm. It signifies an involuntary disruption. A ticking clock begins the exact second that daily medication is missed. Her vulnerability is the very reason this case is so deeply unsettling. The timeline of her final known moments is remarkably narrow. On the night of January 31st at 9:50 in the evening, her son-in-law Tommaso dropped her off at her home in the Catalina foothills of Tucson. Law enforcement has officially cleared Tommaso and the family of any involvement. He simply brought her home and watched her go inside. It was a completely mundane end to a completely ordinary evening. There was no argument. There was no unusual behavior. She walked toward her house, and the heavy garage door began its slow descent. That mechanical sound of the garage door closing usually represents safety and security. It is the barrier that keeps the unpredictable outside world away from a vulnerable elderly woman. But on that night, the closing of the door did not lock the danger out. It locked her inside with whatever was already waiting in the dark. The tension in this case comes from that exact moment of isolation. She was alone. She was medically fragile. She was completely unaware that her rigid daily schedule was about to be permanently severed. When we analyze the behavioral patterns of both victims and perpetrators, we understand that targeting someone in this condition requires a specific type of calculated malice. The predator knew they were dealing with someone who could not physically fight back. They knew she lived alone. They knew the layout of her sanctuary. The contrast between her quiet, devoted life and the violent disruption that followed is the core anomaly of this investigation. We have to ask, what kind of individual watches an 84-year-old woman return home from a family gathering and decides that she is their ultimate target? It is a question that haunts the investigators walking through her perfectly undisturbed home. The Catalina foothills area is generally considered quiet and secure. It is a place where neighbors might notice a strange vehicle or an unfamiliar face. Yet whoever orchestrated this disappearance managed to slip through the cracks of that false security. They bypassed the environmental safeguards and zeroed in on a woman whose physical limitations made her the perfect prey. Every passing hour without her heart medication drastically reduced her chances of survival. The authorities knew this from the moment they received the call. The silence inside her home that night was not peaceful. It was the prologue to a meticulously planned abduction. The morning of February first arrived with a chilling digital silence. The virtual congregation gathered for their daily online church service, but one consistent presence was glaringly absent. Nancy Guthrie did not log in. For a woman whose faith and routine were inextricably linked, this single missing data point was enough to trigger immediate panic. A missing person report was quickly filed, sending law enforcement rushing to the Catalina foothills residence. When police officers cross the threshold of a potential crime scene, they are trained to look for the story the house is trying to tell them. Usually a violent home invasion screams its narrative loudly. Smashed windows, splintered door frames, overturned furniture. But the Guthrie residence offered none of these chaotic signatures. There were absolutely no signs of forced entry. The physical structure of the home remained perfectly intact. This pristine exterior immediately presented a terrifying psychological puzzle for the investigators. Did the perpetrator have a key? Did she open the door for someone she trusted? Or was the attacker simply waiting in the shadows of the property before she even walked inside? The answers seemed impossible to grasp because the interior of the house was just as baffling. The most crucial items a person needs to survive and navigate the world were left behind. Her purse was still there. Her mobile phone, the primary lifeline to her family, was abandoned. And most significantly, her personal vehicle was parked exactly where it belonged. She had not suffered a medical episode while driving. She had not wandered off into the night on her own accord. You do not leave your phone and your purse behind if you are leaving voluntarily. You certainly do not leave them behind if you intend to come back. The untouched nature of her belongings definitively ruled out a voluntary departure. It also ruled out a standard robbery. If the motive was financial gain, the intruder would have taken the cash, the electronics, or the vehicle itself. Thieves want liquid assets and quick escapes. They do not want the logistical nightmare of transporting an 84-year-old hostage. The pristine crime scene pointed to a singular horrifying conclusion. The intruder bypassed all the valuable property because their sole objective was the woman herself. Someone specifically targeted a medically fragile senior citizen. This realization shifted the entire dynamic of the response from a standard missing person search to an urgent criminal manhunt. The local police quickly realized they were dealing with a highly organized threat. They began carefully processing every inch of the property, looking for the microscopic mistakes that even the most careful predators inevitably make. They documented the position of every item in the house. They analyzed the points of entry. They searched for latent fingerprints on the door handles and the walls, but the house was stubbornly quiet. It refused to yield its secrets easily. The authorities needed a break. They needed the perpetrator to have made an error in judgment outside the sterile environment of the home interior. They needed a physical anchor to tie the ghostly disappearance to a tangible reality. The tension among the responding officers must have been palpable as they moved from the living room to the exterior of the house. They knew that an 84-year-old woman without her heart medication was running out of time. They had to find the point of struggle. They had to find the location where the illusion of safety was finally shattered. And as the forensic team moved toward the front porch, the pristine narrative of the undisturbed house violently fell apart. The sterile mystery was about to be stained with undeniable physical proof of a struggle. The digital silence of the morning was replaced by the loud, blaring reality of a violent physical confrontation right on her doorstep. The investigators carefully cordoned off the exterior perimeter. They knew that whatever happened took place in the brief window between her arrival the night before and the missed church service that morning. The timeline was established, the motive remained hidden, but the evidence of a violent extraction was finally coming into focus. The illusion of a peaceful disappearance vanished the moment the crime scene investigators examined the front porch. The quiet mystery transformed into a brutal reality when they discovered a dark stain on the concrete. Forensic technicians immediately collected samples and rushed them to the laboratory for urgent analysis. The results completely eradicated any lingering hope that she had simply wandered away. The DNA extracted from the blood on the porch was a direct match to Nancy Guthrie. This confirmed fact shifted the investigation into a terrifying new gear. There was an altercation, there was trauma, and the perpetrator had left physical evidence of their violence right at the threshold of her home. But the blood was not the only detail that commanded the attention of the federal agents. The investigators noticed that the doorbell camera mounted near the front door had been subjected to severe physical trauma. The device had been deliberately and violently smashed. The perpetrator clearly understood that the electronic eye was recording their every move. In a desperate attempt to conceal their identity and their crime, they attacked the hardware. They struck the camera with enough force to destroy its outer casing, hoping to plunge the investigation into total darkness. This act of destruction reveals a crucial psychological insight about the attacker. They were aware of their surroundings, they recognized the threat of modern surveillance, but they also made a fundamental and arrogant miscalculation. They believed that destroying the physical shell of a camera would permanently erase the history recorded within it. They thought the violence inflicted on the lens would protect them from the consequences of the violence inflicted on the 84-year-old victim. This is a common misconception among criminals who do not understand the architecture of modern security systems. When a camera is smashed, the data it captured does not simply evaporate into the desert, air. The forensic reality is far more resilient than shattered plastic and broken glass. The attacker left blood on the concrete but failed to realize they had also left a digital footprint trapped within the damaged circuits. While the local police secured the physical perimeter, the Federal Bureau of Investigation took possession of the ruined camera. They transported the broken pieces to their specialized digital forensics laboratory. The attacker assumed their violent cover-up was successful. But federal technicians operate on an entirely different level of expertise. They began the meticulous process of extracting the encrypted files from the damaged memory components. The blood on the porch proved that Nancy was taken by force. The smashed camera proved that the attacker was desperate to hide their face. Together, these two pieces of evidence formed the foundational peak of this investigation. We have the biological proof of the crime and the damaged technological witness that recorded it. If you find the intersection of physical forensics and digital reconstruction as fascinating as we do, please hit the like button on this video. Your support allows us to continue bringing you these detailed analytical breakdowns. The destruction of the camera was meant to be the end of the story. It was meant to blind the authorities and ensure a clean getaway. But in the world of advanced criminal investigation, an attempt to destroy evidence often becomes the most glaring piece of evidence itself. The attacker left a trail. They thought they were invisible. They were wrong. The smashed device was holding a secret that would soon blow the case wide open. The painstaking work happening inside the federal laboratory was a race against the ticking clock of the victim's failing health. Every passing minute decreased the probability of a safe recovery. The blood evidence alone was not enough to identify a suspect. It only confirmed the identity of the victim and the violent nature of the event. The entire trajectory of the manhunt now depended heavily on what the digital forensics team could salvage from the wreckage of that doorbell camera. The silence of the crime scene was deafening, but the shattered technology was preparing to speak. As the gravity of the blood evidence and the smashed camera became clear, the scope of the investigation expanded massively. The Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Department of Justice officially took the reins. This rapid federal escalation was driven by two critical factors. First, the sheer brazenness of kidnapping a medically fragile senior citizen demanded the highest level of law enforcement resources. Second, the victim was the mother of Savannah Guthrie, a prominent national television host. This celebrity connection immediately thrust the case into the blinding glare of the national media spotlight. A staggering $1 million reward was offered for information leading to a resolution. While this massive financial incentive was intended to generate viable leads, it predictably triggered an avalanche of digital noise and predatory behavior. When high-profile cases hit the news cycle, opportunistic predators often emerge from the shadows, attempting to exploit the desperation of the grieving family. This is exactly what happened in the days following the disappearance. The family received chilling messages demanding money in exchange for the safe return of the 84-year-old woman. For a brief moment, it appeared the motive had finally revealed itself. But federal investigators are trained to verify before they negotiate. The Department of Justice utilized advanced tracking techniques to trace the origin of the extortion demands. On February 5th, their efforts culminated in the arrest of a 42-year-old man named Derek Colella. The federal indictment confirmed that Colella had sent fake ransom messages to the family. He had absolutely no connection to the actual kidnapping. He was simply a digital scavenger trying to cash in on a highly publicized tragedy. The arrest of the fake extortionist was a necessary step, but it was also a massive distraction from the core objective. It forced investigators to divert precious time and resources away from finding the true perpetrator. While the public was focused on the sensational headlines about the ransom plot, the real investigation was battling on multiple fronts. Law enforcement had to methodically eliminate the people closest to the victim to ensure they were looking in the right direction. Rumors had begun to swirl around the son-in-law Tommaso, who was the last person to see her alive at 9:50 that night. But the local police department swiftly and officially cleared him and the rest of the family of any involvement. The evidence completely exonerated them. This official clearance is a vital forensic checkpoint. It means the attacker was an outsider. It means the threat came from the dark, not from within the family circle. The noise of the fake ransom and the cleared family members left the investigators exactly where they started, staring at a pristine house, a bloody driveway, and a broken camera. The media circus surrounding the celebrity connection and the extortionist arrest created a chaotic smokescreen. But inside the secure laboratories of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the noise of the outside world was completely shut out. The digital technicians were not distracted by the news cameras or the internet rumors. They were hyper-focused on the microscopic circuits of the smashed device. They understood that the physical destruction of the outer casing did not necessarily compromise the encrypted data stored deep within the memory chips. The perpetrator had hit the camera hard enough to draw blood from the victim, but they had not understood the resilience of cloud synchronization and solid-state storage. While the internet was busy chasing fake ransom theories and pointing fingers at innocent family members, the federal technicians were successfully bypassing the physical damage. They were painstakingly reconstructing the corrupted video files frame by agonizing frame. The attacker believed the darkness would protect them. They believed their violent intervention had permanently blinded the electronic witness on the porch, but the forensic reality was quietly assembling itself in a sterile laboratory far away from the crime scene. The distraction of the fake extortion plot was finally fading away. The true narrative was about to emerge from the digital ashes. The painstaking recovery process was nearing completion. The shadows on the porch were about to be forcefully illuminated, and the face of the phantom who vanished into the night was about to be revealed to the world. The pressure on the federal team was immense. The $1 million reward remained unclaimed, while the biological clock of an 84-year-old woman without her vital medication ticked relentlessly toward a fatal conclusion. The investigators knew that every false lead, like the extortion attempt, cost them irreversible time. They needed the camera to yield its secrets immediately. The entire nation was watching, waiting for the digital ghost to finally materialize on the laboratory monitors. On February 13th, the agonizing silence surrounding the digital investigation was finally shattered. The highly specialized technicians working behind closed doors achieved what the perpetrator thought was absolutely impossible. They successfully extracted the corrupted video files from the damaged hardware left at the scene. The resulting images were not perfectly clear, but they provided the first tangible look at the phantom who had orchestrated this nightmare. Law enforcement officially released the description of the individual captured moving toward the residence. The footage revealed a male subject standing approximately 5'9" to 5'10" tall, with an average physical build. He was fully aware of the surveillance capabilities of the modern world. He wore a mask to completely obscure his facial features and carried a distinct black Ozark Trail backpack. This was not a panicked intruder stumbling through the dark. This was a calculated predator arriving with specialized gear intended for a very specific purpose. The release of this physical description was meant to generate legitimate leads from the public. Instead, it ignited a dangerous firestorm of rampant speculation across the internet. In the absence of immediate answers, amateur online detectives began conducting their own chaotic investigations. They scoured social media and public arrest records looking for anyone who remotely matched the vague physical profile of the masked man. The digital mob quickly zeroed in on a 22-year-old former Pima County Sheriff deputy named Travis Reynolds. This individual had recently been taken into custody for an entirely unrelated set of suspected offenses. Because he had a background in law enforcement and possessed a similar physical build, the internet unilaterally decided he was the mastermind behind the abduction. The accusation spread with terrifying speed. Viral posts and unchecked comment sections transformed an unfounded theory into accepted truth almost overnight. This is the inherent danger of crowdsourced justice. It operates entirely on confirmation bias and ignores the rigid requirements of forensic evidence. The situation escalated to the point where official investigators were forced to intervene. Pima County authorities had to publicly and categorically deny any link between the former deputy and the missing, highly vulnerable elderly woman. They confirmed that this alleged connection was nothing more than a baseless rumor, but the damage to the investigative timeline was already done. Every hour that detectives spent debunking internet conspiracy theories was an hour stolen from the pursuit of the actual suspect. The detectives had to divert resources to manage the public relations crisis caused by armchair sleuths, while the real perpetrator continued to evade capture. The man with the black backpack was still out there. The digital footprint had given the authorities a shape and a height, but it had not given them a name. The attacker had approached the house on foot. The video showed him walking toward the porch, but it did not show him leaving. The logistical reality of the crime dictated that he could not have simply carried his victim away through the neighborhood streets without triggering additional security systems or attracting the attention of nocturnal witnesses. He needed a way to transport her quickly and quietly out of the immediate area. The authorities realized that the quiet residential street was only the extraction point. There had to be a secondary location. There had to be a staging area where the predator transitioned from a vulnerable pedestrian to a mobile threat. The investigation expanded outward from the house in widening concentric circles. They were looking for the missing piece of the transportation puzzle. They were looking for the vehicle that carried the masked man into the Catalina foothills and spirited the captive away into the desert night. The tension was reaching a breaking point as the physical search grid grew larger. Tell us what you think about the impact of internet sleuths on active criminal investigations in the comments below, because your perspective helps us analyze the societal side of true crime. The authorities were racing against time to find the link between the man on the porch and the vast network of roads leading out of the city. The investigators meticulously reviewed traffic cameras and license plate readers stationed along the major arterial routes surrounding the neighborhood. They were hunting for any vehicle that moved with unexplained urgency during that critical overnight window. The masked man had to have left a mechanical trace. The silence of the desert was vast, but it was not absolute. Somewhere out there, a vehicle was hiding the darkest secret of the year. Every single frame of traffic video was subjected to intense scrutiny by federal agents, desperate for a lead. They refused to let the darkness swallow the truth entirely. The breakthrough came exactly when the tension felt unbearable. On the night of February 13th, stretching into the early morning hours of February 14th, law enforcement executed a massive coordinated operation. They descended upon a commercial area that seemed entirely disconnected from the quiet wealth of the Catalina foothills. Heavily armed agents and local police officers completely blockaded the parking lot of a Culver franchise location situated roughly 2 miles away from the original crime scene. The target of this intense tactical focus was a single vehicle sitting silently in the dark. It was a Range Rover. Authorities officially confirmed that the seizure of this specific luxury utility vehicle was directly tied to the ongoing abduction investigation. The distance of 2 miles is forensically significant. It is far enough away to avoid the immediate scrutiny of the neighborhood watch programs, but close enough to serve as a highly effective staging area for the masked man. The perpetrator likely parked the Range Rover in the commercial lot, blending in with the late-night traffic before making the final approach to the target residence on foot. This tactical separation between the primary vehicle and the point of contact demonstrates a chilling level of premeditation. The man with the Ozark Trail backpack did not want his license plate captured by any residential security systems. He created a buffer zone. But the discovery of the Range Rover was only the beginning of the forensic cascade. As the vehicle was towed away to a secure processing facility, another critical piece of the physical puzzle began to surface. The information surrounding this development is highly sensitive, but according to reports from the World News Group, a secondary location yielded a massive biological clue. Investigators reportedly discovered a discarded glove located several miles away from the primary scenes. This was not just any piece of winter clothing. The recovered item reportedly matched the exact type and style of glove worn by the suspect in the recovered video footage. The visual match was compelling, but the microscopic evidence was devastating. The report states that the glove contained viable trace genetic material belonging to the suspect. If this reported information holds true, it represents a catastrophic failure on the part of the attacker. The masked man went to extraordinary lengths to conceal his identity. He parked his vehicle miles away. He covered his face. He attacked the surveillance equipment, but in his desperate attempt to flee the area, he made a critical error. He discarded a piece of clothing saturated with his own biological markers. The connection between the man on the video, the seized Range Rover, and the reportedly recovered DNA creates a formidable chain of physical evidence. The authorities now had a vehicle to dismantle for trace fibers and a potential profile to run through federal databases. The pieces of the puzzle were finally snapping together with terrifying clarity. We rely on careful analysis to build these timelines. So if you appreciate this level of detail, make sure to engage with the channel to support our ongoing research. The walls were rapidly closing in on the individual who thought he had committed the perfect crime. The federal agents had the digital image. They had the staging vehicle. They reportedly had the biological signature of the phantom. The technological and forensic nets were drawn tight across the city. The illusion of the untraceable predator was completely shattered by the relentless application of modern investigative science. But despite this monumental wave of physical evidence, a crushing reality remained suspended over the entire operation. The biological profile and the luxury SUV offered a clear path toward identifying the attacker, but they did not answer the most urgent question of all. The tactical victories in the laboratory and in the fast food parking lot felt hollow against the overwhelming silence of the missing victim. The agents had everything they needed to catch a ghost, but they still had absolutely no idea where. The man with the black backpack had taken the elderly mother of the broadcaster. The meticulous planning evident in the staging of the vehicle and the use of protective gear suggested that the final destination was equally secure. The predator had mapped out his entry and his exit with clinical precision. He knew exactly how to move through the shadows of the city without drawing immediate attention. The forensic team was processing the Range Rover for any microscopic clue that might indicate the direction of travel. They were looking for soil samples in the tire treads or specific pollen strains trapped in the air. Filters. Every single speck of dust inside that vehicle was a potential map leading to the missing woman. The momentum of the physical investigation forces us to confront the darkest and most perplexing aspect of this entire ordeal. We have a timeline of violence and a trail of tangible evidence, but the core motivation driving this elaborate operation remains a complete void. In the realm of criminal psychology, determining the why is often the key to discovering the where. But this case stubbornly refuses to fit into any conventional behavioral mold. We know with absolute certainty that this was not a burglary gone wrong. The untouched valuables left sitting in the house completely eliminate financial desperation as a primary motive. We also know that the ransom demands were nothing more than a cruel digital hoax perpetrated by an opportunistic scavenger miles away. The extortion angle was officially dead. This leaves investigators staring at a terrifying set of possibilities. If the attacker did not want cash and did not want to steal a vehicle, what was the ultimate goal? The fact that the victim is the mother of a highly visible national television personality introduces a deeply unsettling variable into the equation. Was this a targeted strike designed to inflict maximum psychological pain on a public figure? Or was the attacker driven by a localized obsession completely unrelated to the fame of her family? The sheer amount of risk involved in abducting a medically fragile individual suggests a motive rooted in intense personal fixation or calculated vengeance. The perpetrator knew that law enforcement would hunt them relentlessly, yet they proceeded anyway. The current state of the investigation is a grueling exercise in endurance. The case remains wide open. Federal agents and local detectives continue to chase down leads and process the overwhelming amount of forensic data extracted from the digital and physical evidence. The heavy burden of the unknown still hangs in the air, waiting for the single tip that will break the silence. The community remains in a state of suspended animation. The fear is palpable because the predator who executed this flawless extraction has not yet been named. When you strip away all the police tape and the laboratory reports, you are left with a profoundly haunting image. The garage door of the home in the Catalina foothills remains closed. It stands as a silent monument to the terrifying speed at which a peaceful life can be dismantled. The driveway where the violent struggle took place has been cleaned, but the psychological stain on the neighborhood is permanent. The investigation has uncovered the methods and the mistakes of the masked man, but it has not unraveled his ultimate plan. The authorities have the how, but they are still desperately searching for the why. Until that fundamental question is answered, the shadow of the man with the Ozark Trail backpack will continue to loom over the desert landscape. The physical evidence is secure in the federal vaults, but the fragile senior citizen taken away is still lost in the dark. The silence of the open case is a constant reminder that even with the best technology in the world, some secrets are buried incredibly deep. The search continues without pause. The task force is operating around the clock, analyzing the data streams and following the genetic breadcrumbs. They are interviewing associates and reviewing decades of background history to find any hidden connection that might explain this. Targeted hostility. The detectives know that the answer is hiding somewhere in the vast web of relationships and past encounters. They are looking for the grudge that festered in the dark or the obsession that spiraled out of control. Every open case carries a heavy psychological burden for the investigators involved. They carry the weight of the unanswered questions and the crushing pressure of the ticking clock. The family is trapped in an agonizing limbo, waiting for a phone call that might bring closure or absolute devastation. The reality of true crime is not neatly wrapped up in a predictable time frame. It is a chaotic and grueling process filled with agonizing delays and frustrating dead ends. The closed garage door is a stark symbol of this unfinished narrative. The story remains painfully incomplete, and the final chapter has yet to be written by the authorities. When we analyze the mechanics of this investigation, two critical lessons emerge from the darkness. First, the attempt to destroy the surveillance equipment highlights a fundamental misunderstanding of modern digital forensics. Smashing the physical casing of a camera does not erase the encrypted data stored within the solid-state memory or the synchronized cloud servers. Digital footprints are remarkably resilient, and federal technicians possess the tools to reconstruct seemingly destroyed evidence frame by frame. The hardware is just a shell. The data is the true witness, and it cannot be silenced by brute force. Second, what this case teaches us about the danger of the digital mob is profoundly alarming. The immediate rush by amateur online sleuths to publicly accuse an unrelated individual based purely on superficial similarities demonstrates how quickly misinformation can derail a legitimate criminal investigation. When the internet decides to play detective without access to the actual chain of custody, they create a chaotic environment of false leads. This vigilantism forces actual law enforcement to divert critical time and resources away from hunting the real predator in order to manage the public fallout of internet rumors. In high stakes investigations, where every passing minute degrades the survival chances of a fragile victim, these digital distractions are not just irresponsible, they are actively dangerous. The spread of unverified theories serves only to protect the guilty and hinder the relentless pursuit of verifiable physical truth. The analytical reality is that criminal justice requires patience and strict adherence to the scientific method. Society must learn to resist the immediate gratification of viral accusations and instead trust the slow, methodical process of forensic evaluation. The integrity of the investigation must always supersede the desire for instant online answers. The image of the unidentified figure walking into the night with his black backpack is a chilling reminder of the unknown threats that exist just beyond our doors. The authorities are slowly closing the net using the science of genetics and digital reconstruction to drag him into the light. But the physical world is only one half of the investigative landscape. When a perpetrator vanishes without leaving a ransom note or a clear demand, their financial history often becomes the most revealing evidence of all. People can wear masks and destroy cameras, but money always leaves a highly visible trail. In our next deep dive, we will examine exactly how forensic accountants trace hidden transactions and expose the invisible financial networks that criminals use to fund their operations. We will look at how the flow of currency can ultimately lead investigators directly to a concealed location. You will not want to miss this breakdown of financial tracking. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you are ready when we uncover the next layer of the truth. The pursuit of justice never stops, and neither do we. Join us next time.